Hey, BBN. Otega Oa needs to be more aggressive in his free throw attempts. How can this guy improve his performance with the Cats? Let's get to the news, subscribe, and keep receiving more news from the blue and white team. The star of the 2025-26 Kentucky basketball season has offered a curious study in adaptation and offensive identity, and few stories illustrate this as directly as Otega Oa's trajectory. The veteran who arrived this year surrounded by expectations. SEC Player of the Year in the preseason, a natural All-American candidate, is not disappointing in the raw numbers, but is also not delivering exactly the impact that many imagined. And that's precisely where the most intriguing point of his evolution lies. Oa maintained solid averages: 13 points, 3.7 rebounds, 2.3 assists, scoring in double digits in every game, in addition to excellent overall shooting near the basket. His conversion rate on short-range shots, especially around the rim, jumped from 63.5% to an impressive 72.4%. At many moments, he appears more vertical, more incisive, more direct. Mark Pope has always valued players who attack the rim with conviction, and in this aspect, Oa continues to represent a pillar of reliability. But at the same time, there is a fundamental element of his game that has practically evaporated: the ability to generate free throws. And for a player like Oa, this is more than a detail. It's an essential part of his offensive DNA. In the previous season, he lived on the line, averaging 5.3 attempts per game, a natural consequence of his aggressiveness, his physical strength, and his contact reading. Now, that average has dropped to 2.9. The raw number is already noteworthy, but what's truly worrying is the percentage of fouls drawn per possession, plummeting from 46.3% to 28.2%. Oa is successful when he gets there 18 out of 20, 90%, but he simply doesn't get there, and that changes the whole equation. The player himself acknowledges the problem with an honesty that should please the coaching staff. He knows he's getting to the paint more often, but he's not forcing contact. His drives are more fluid and efficient when he has space, especially in transition. However, when the situation calls for strength, imposition, and reading the defender, his former trademark, he has been less incisive. The number of shots in the paint, not on the rim, but in the congested area, clearly illustrates this. A drop from 29.9% in volume to just 12.7%, accompanied by a shooting percentage that plummeted to 33.3%. This is a terrain where dominant players build their reputation, and Oa knows he needs to reclaim that territory. The change in the team spacing also weighs heavily. With a more compact formation, without Jalen Lowe as a secondary creative engine, penetrating runs become more difficult. Mark Pope has alternated between aggressive, defensive, and shooting-focused formations, but the team's cohesion is still under construction. It's natural that a player who thrives in organized chaos, cuts, gaps contact, feels it more when the wingers don't appear at the same pace. Oa didn't shy away from talking about this. He pointed out the need to adjust, to drop deeper, to attack with more force. These words sound like a diagnosis, but also like a promise. And if there's anything the coaching staff can take as a positive from this phase, it's that the player is aware, lucid, and willing to face the process. He's not a complacent veteran. He's a leader who understands what the team needs from him. Mark Pope, always incisive in the pursuit of collective identity, knows that this is the type of player who can change the course of an important game. Oa's aggressiveness is not just a technical characteristic, but an emotional trigger for the team. It's the kind of action that opens up the court, that frees up the shooters, that puts pressure on the referees, and wears down the opponents. When he's on the line, Kentucky breathes deeper, plays more comfortably, and controls the pace. For now, what we see is an efficient but not complete Otega Oa, a player with strong statistics, but moderate impact. However, a small reorientation of focus, less finesse in congested area, more contact, less drifting, more imposition, is all it takes for the veteran to quickly return to the level that made him an All-American candidate. And if that happens, Kentucky immediately becomes more dangerous. The good news for Mark Pope is that Oa knows this, and recognizing it is always the first step to recovering the most dominant version of himself. The relationship between Mark Pope and Mark Stoops was never just a cordial coexistence between two coaches of different sports within the University of Kentucky. It was, and continues to be, a partnership built on mutual respect, professional admiration, and a deep understanding of what it means to lead programs that carry the emotional weight of an entire state. Therefore, when the news of Stoops' dismissal was made official on Monday morning, Pope didn't just react. He made sure to transform his radio program into a public space for recognition. Stoops' departure, after 13 years leading the Wildcats football team, marks the end of a cycle that redefined the team's standing in the SEC. These were years of rebuilding historic achievements and a consolidation of a competitive identity that, until his arrival, seemed unattainable. Even with the last 2 seasons ending with losing records, Stoops' figure remains bigger than any bad streak. And in basketball, where Mark Pope is still taking his first steps as a coach in Lexington, this perspective is even clearer. During the radio program, Pope opened the evening with a speech that went beyond formality. He spoke as someone who lived with, listened to, learned from, and was inspired by him. "I love Mark," he said bluntly. The words, strong and direct, echoed a sentiment shared within the athletic department. Stoops was not only the most successful coach in Kentucky football history, but also a presence that helped shape the internal culture of college athletics. The messages exchanged after the game against Louisville, the meetings the previous week, the ongoing dialogues. All of this evidences a relationship that transcends positions. Pope called him a mentor, and the term is not an exaggeration. There is a human connection in this bond, a sense of continuity between the one who is leaving and the one who is building a future in one of the most demanding programs in the country. Considering accounts like that of Matt Jones of KSR, Stoops himself is doing well after leaving, serene, aware of the legacy he leaves behind. And this legacy, it's worth remembering, includes a deep sense of belonging. Stoops told Pope that he is a Kentucky native at heart and soul, and, according to sources, plans to remain in Lexington while he decides on his next career steps. It's not common for a coach fired from a major program to want to continue living in the same city, breathing the same sporting atmosphere. But with Stoops, it makes sense. He didn't just hold the position, he was part of the community fabric. For Mark Pope, who is at the beginning of his own chapter in Kentucky's history, this kind of trajectory serves as a guiding light. Within UK athletics, there's an invisible line connecting coaches who understand the value of representing the state, of engaging with the fans, of building something lasting. Pope recognizes this and, by publicly honoring Stoops, demonstrates that he too sees his mission as something long-term, based not only on victories but on culture. Stoops' departure inevitably opens up space for debates about the future, paths forward, and restructuring. But the way Pope handled the moment shows how basketball and football, often seen as distinct planets within the same system, are more interconnected than it seems. A football coach leaves his post, and the basketball coach uses his microphone to ensure his story is told with due respect. Mark Stoops may no longer be the Kentucky coach, but he remains the most victorious in the program's history, and, judging by Mark Pope's tone, he also remains part of the sporting heart of Lexington. Let's move on. Demare Williams' withdrawal came as a cold shower at a particularly turbulent time for Kentucky's football program. It's not just about losing a recruit. It's about losing the right recruit at the wrong time, in a context where every move in the talent market seems to carry double the weight. Williams, one of JUCO's top national safety players, 8th best safety in top 65 overall, according to the Rivals industry ranking, had been welcomed as an impactful addition. His arrival made sense within the rapid replacement strategy Kentucky had been developing, especially after the need to rebuild critical parts of the defense. The official visit to Lexington, the initial commitment, and a clear plan to enroll him as early as January gave the staff the feeling that they had found a piece that could contribute from the first snap of the fall. But the commitment lasted only a few days. The message posted by Williams on social media was polite, elegant, and respectful, frequent traits in athletes who go through difficult decision-making processes. He thanked the coaching staff, acknowledged the opportunity, and made it clear that the decision was made after conversations with his family and a thorough analysis of his future. None of this sounds artificial. For an athlete coming from JUCO, with little room for error on his path to FBS, any move needs to be calculated with surgical precision. What is striking, however, is the timing. The withdrawal came less than a day after the 41-0 loss to Louisville in the final round of the regular season, a result that exposed weaknesses and rekindled doubts about the direction of the program. Add to that the uncertainty surrounding the future of Mark Stoops, whose departure will be made official shortly afterward, and an understandable scenario for hesitation is formed. For a player who had the promise of competing for immediate playing time, the stability of the environment is a crucial part of the package. And stability at this moment is precisely what Kentucky cannot offer. The loss of Williams contrasts with the continued presence of Braxton Urquhart, another talent from JUCO who remains committed. But even if symbolic, this isolated resistance is not enough to disguise the fact. The sudden decline in such a recent recruitment reveals the program's vulnerability in the face of current circumstances. In times of uncertainty, every negative movement takes on greater proportions than it normally would. For Kentucky, the challenge now is to regain control. With Stoops' departure and the need to reorganize not only the staff, but also the narrative surrounding the program, every player who drops out, every doubt that arises, and every prolonged silence in the recruiting rooms contributes to a sense of instability that competitors will certainly try to exploit. Demare Williams could have been, in the short term, a defensive anchor, a player capable of filling gaps while the program reorganized its foundations. Now, she becomes a reminder of the impact that institutional instability can have on recruitment, especially when it involves athletes with competitive urgency and several alternatives on the table. Leave your opinion.